presentation.
Hair.
Press conference.
Wow.
So we were talking about this. And I'm just
Have a focus back.
Good morning. Senate will come to order. Please join me in a moment of silence to start the week in lieu of devotional. Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any announcements this morning? Seeing none, we have a series of bills that need to be referred under Rule 31 to Finance. The following bills appearing on the notice calendar and affecting the revenue are under the rule referred to the Committee on Finance. I will do them as one sequence: S25, S33, S56, S80, and S135. Similarly, we have a series of bills to move under Rule 31 to appropriations. Again, I'll do them as a series. The following bills appearing on the notice calendar and carrying an appropriation or requiring an expenditure are under the rule referred to the Committee on Appropriations: S17, S27, S30, S39, S42, and S102. We have a joint resolution at this time regarding weekend adjournment, JRS 20, and it is offered by Senator Baruth of Chittenden Central. Please listen to the reading of the resolution.
JRS 20, Joint Resolution Relating to Weekend Adjournment. Resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives that when the two houses adjourn on Friday, March 24, 2023, it be to meet again no later than Tuesday, March 28, 2023.
Now you've heard the reading of the resolution. The question is, shall the Senate adopt the resolution on its part? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have adopted the resolution. We now have three Senate bills for introduction. S137, an act relating to energy efficiency modernization, introduced by the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
S137, an act relating to energy efficiency modernization.
Now the bill has been read the first time and pursuant to Rule 48 is placed on the calendar for notice the next succeeding day. We have S138, an act relating to school safety, introduced by the Committee on Education. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
S138, an act relating to school safety.
Now the bill has been read the first time. Pursuant to Rule 48, it is placed on the calendar for notice the next succeeding day. And S139, an act relating to the modernization of public safety communications in Vermont, introduced by the Committee on Government Operations. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
S139, an act relating to the modernization of Vermont safety communications in Vermont.
Now the bill's been read the first time, and pursuant to Rule 48, it is placed on the calendar for notice the next succeeding day. We have one House bill for reference, H175, an act relating to modernizing the Children and Family Council for Prevention Programs, introduced by Representative Lalonde of South Burlington. The bill passed the House on March 16th. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
H-175, an act relating to modernizing the Children and Family Council for Prevention programs.
Now the bill has been read the first time and is referred to the Committee on Judiciary. That brings us to the orders of the day. We have 3 bills on the calendar for third reading. The first of those, S6. Are there any amendments before third reading? Please listen to the third reading of the bill.
S6, an act relating to custodial interrogation of juveniles.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no. The ayes have it, and you have passed S6. S65, also up for third reading, an act relating to commercial insurance coverage of epinephrine auto-injectors. Third reading was ordered March 17th. Are you ready for the question, shall the bill pass? Oops, please listen to the third reading of the bill. Are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
S65, an act relating to commercial insurance coverage of epinephrine auto-injectors.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no. The ayes have it, and you have passed S65. We have S93, an act relating to the sales tax exemption for advanced wood boilers. Are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
S93, an act relating to the sales tax exemption for advanced wood boilers.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have passed S93. We have S104, an act relating to designating August 31st as Overdose Awareness Day. Are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
S104, an act relating to designating August 31 as Overdose Awareness Day.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have passed S104. We have JRS 19. Are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
JRS 19, joint resolution relating to state lands transactions in Jamaica State Park and Coolidge State Forest.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have passed JRS 19. We have now several bills for second reading, first of which a committee bill S99, an act relating to miscellaneous changes to laws related to vehicles. The bill was introduced by the Committee on Transportation. It was then referred to the Committee on Finance, which reports that it ought to pass, and from there referred to the Committee on Appropriations, who also report that it ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
S99, an act relating to miscellaneous changes to laws related to vehicles.
I would recognize the senator from Chittenden Southeast, Senator Chittenden, for a report of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. There is an amendment, but I'll speak to that separately at the end, and with Mr. President's permission, we'll be presenting with both myself as well as the senator from Washington for a few of the sections. So this is 47 sections. It's a miscellaneous bill. We're about to go through a meandering path of a variety of topics. The first one, in section 1, addresses a notion about the lemon law. All this does is makes crystal clear, it amends codified law to provide that the consumer continues to have 1 year following the expiration of the express warranty to recommence proceedings under the new motor vehicle arbitration law, the lemon law, if proceedings are terminated because the manufacturer performs corrective work satisfactory to the consumer prior to the scheduled hearing. It doesn't change anything, it just makes clear what we understand the case to be regarding consumer rights with the lemon law. Section 2 has to do with the definition of mail. I think we've seen that in a few other bills so far. It just adds to codified law a definition of mail for all of Title 23, which would include electronic mail, as you'll see in the bill. It would give the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles the authority to authorize methods of delivery. Mobile identification. So this, there was some news coverage on it, so maybe this rings a bell. This adds to codified law a mobile identification with which one piece of this bill that the commissioner may issue, does not have to issue, in addition to and not in lieu of the individual who holds a Department of Motor Vehicles credential. So one of those DMV credentials that might not necessarily be driving, this just allows them to also issue a mobile identification version of that, which you'll see in other sections of this bill as well. Sections 4 through 13, I'm going to speak to in entirety. If you've ever registered your license plates here in the great state of Vermont, you've had to take that little sticker that comes in the mail, peel it off, and then put it on the license plate, wiping the dirt off. You're getting rid of that. So that's no longer necessary. You often can't read them. It also costs the state a fair amount of money for those special materials, that's durable stickers. So this eliminates the annual or biennial validation sticker that the Commissioner of Motor Vehicle currently issues to go on license plates and makes related technical changes. Additionally, you're going to hear more about this momentarily from my colleague from the Senator from Washington, but this also will allow for the electronic proof of registration. So it'll allow an operator to show proof of registration of their vehicle electronically on a portable electronic device, and allows an operator cited for failing to carry proof of registration to produce proof after the fact within 7 days after. So it gives them some flexibility to turn it over. What you're going to hear more from the Senator from Washington momentarily is all of this is part of a DMV modernization effort to allow for a lot more flexibility and updating of that system to allow for electronic collection of fees, as well as management of the different documents. Am I permitted to just give the floor to another senator? I don't recall on this.
That's fine, thank you.
Great. Section 15 is now where we are.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I'm going to go through section 15 through 29. 15 and 16 sections just clarify basically the definition of a pleasure car includes electric vehicles. You might have heard that there's some proposals out there to charge a registration fee different for electric vehicles going forward. This is not that. This is just making sure that a pleasure car definition includes the electric vehicles, and in section 16, plug-in electric vehicles. This kind of cleanup language that kind of sets us up to do a better job of how we charge electric vehicles in the future. Section 17 is something that was brought to us by Senator Caledonia. This is right now, if you're on a road in Vermont and there's no sign, the speed limit is 50 miles an hour. So this made some of our back dirt roads in a lot of towns that didn't have a sign on it that the speed limit was 50 miles an hour. And we thought that was excessive for some of these roads. And the only way you would know this, there's signs as you enter the state from neighboring states on the roads where it says this. If you're on a road that doesn't have a speed limit, it's 50 miles an hour. So we have added language that says that it's 35 miles an hour for unpaved town highways instead of that 50. Section 18 just requires Agency of Transportation to do an outreach campaign about this change from 50 miles an hour to 35 miles an hour for these unpaved town highways. Section 19 is a section that we passed in the miscellaneous DMV bill last year. The DMV miscellaneous bill last year never became law. We had a conference committee about it. We agreed to some parts. We took some parts and put it into the T bill, but the DMV bill failed to come out of the conference committee. So these are sections that we agreed on last year. The first section A, as you can see, is just technical changes, changing person to individual. But where there's substantial changes is in section B. And this provides a new definition subsection. In it, the key point is it excludes the definition of a drug, excludes regulated drugs that have been prescribed. So the total abstinence program is like if you've had several DUIs, you can't drive, but this is if you're going to be total abstinence, and there's definition to clarify that total abstinence means total. But we make an exception that if you're on prescription drugs, you won't be in violation of the total abstinence program. If you remember last year, Senator Pearson had an amendment that was withdrawn about whether medicated cannabis would include. This does not include that. So we maintained what we agreed to last year, that this does not include medical cannabis. If you're on medical cannabis, you would be in violation of the total abstinence program and you wouldn't be able to drive. And so these are other changes are moving it around and making it consistent and putting on guardrails about the total abstinence program. Section 20 also is about the total abstinence program, and it requires the commissioner of DMV to do outreach to the participants so they know these new definitions, that they know that medical cannabis is not allowed. And more kind of belt and suspenders language about the total abstinence program and these changes that we're making. Section 21 is on noise and specifically motorcycles. What it does is it requires that the motorcycles in Vermont have a stamp that's required by the Fed. So it's basically, if you have a motorcycle that was manufactured, it needs to have the stamp saying that it's meeting a certain standard and a certain decibel standard. This is a standard by the EPA, if I remember. Yeah, from the EPA. So this can even be, pretty loud. Harley Davidson, Screaming Eagles can have the stamp. It just says that it's the manufacturer's muffler, that somebody hasn't taken off the manufacturer's muffler and bought an aftermarket muffler. That's, sole purpose is to be loud. So this requires that stamp be present for the vehicle to pass inspection. The section 22, the limits on gross weight limits on highways. This is a complicated change, but basically right now there was 3 different options when you're getting overweight permits. In the end, all it does is really takes away a $10 fee and makes it clear that the fee is $382 if you're going to be asking for this excess weight permit. This is often from milk haulers and other haulers that need to have this excess weight permit. So there's a slight fee in the fiscal note because of this changes of the fees. We will something like loss of $15,000, but that we're gaining in other parts of the bill. Makes them clear that this pertains to the highways. Vermont is one of few states that are allowed to have increased weights on the interstate highway system. Several other parts where it's just clarifying that the fee is now $382 and not $415. Section 23, it makes it clear that you can have an electronic permit, because it says you have to have the permit in there. So this says like if you have this electronically, that can be allowed. And that's also what section 24 is about, allowing the electronic permits that you've heard about before. Section 25, this is grandfathering in old vehicle. Right now, if you have a vehicle that doesn't have a title, to get a title from DMV, it had to be over 15 years old. So the commissioner had the ability to provide a title, but it had to be 15 years or older. Now we're saying all vehicles have to have a title. Doesn't matter on the age. And so we're grandfathering in those ones that are older than 50 years, and now requiring the commissioner, taking away this parts where it talked about 15 years. So all vehicles will have a title. Section 26, this is eliminating the concept of an exempt vehicle title. So that's what we were doing with these vehicles that were over 15 years. You could say, okay, you can get a title, and we called it an exempt title. But now that all vehicles have to have titles, we don't need to have this whole exempt title language in statute. So it's deleting all that language about what an exempt title is, because we're not going to have them anymore. And this is a part of DMV's whole modernization, updating of the computer system. We'll be able to do this much better and be able to have titles for all vehicles. Section 27, the issuance certificate. This clarifies that title can be issued to a vehicle of any age, same issue, allowing the commissioner to issue electronic titles. And because we're not going to have the limit on 15 years, it strikes that. Same with 28, just clarifying that we don't have this 15 years or older requirement anymore on titles. Section 29 is about a bonding requirement. This was something that was in the DMV bill last year. You could get, and so if you want to have a title, you could show that you had and you don't have a title, one of your things you would do as the commissioner to prove that was your vehicle, just in case it wasn't your vehicle and there was somebody out there that had a loan on it that really had rights to the value of the vehicle, you could put it in a bond. You would give a bond for twice the value of the vehicle to the commissioner and say, like, if somebody comes forward and says that really they own the vehicle, this bond would help, provide that folks with the money that they need. That was allowed for anybody, even non-residents. The DMV would like to limit that only to Vermont residents, so that you don't have somebody out of state asking for this bonded title. So this just makes it clear in section 29 that the commissioner shall only do these bonded titles if for Vermont residents. So with that, those are the section I was going to go over, and we'll turn it over back to the senator from Chittenden.
Great, so I'm going to talk about sections 30 through 34 next, all in this category of towing. So every year, thousands and thousands of new cars are purchased in the great state of Vermont, and many, hundreds, if not thousands of cars meet their useful life, and they go to their forever home. But not all those cars make it to the right scrap yards, and sometimes they are abandoned on the sides of our roads. We heard, I believe in testimony, up to like 800 a year, depending on the year, of cars need to be collected, reclaimed, and then brought somewhere because they've just run out their useful life. This amends some of the current statutes regarding towing. It does add the definition for towing business. For the purposes of Title 23, it also allows a vehicle to meet the definition of abandoned if a law enforcement officer requests that vehicle be removed by a towing business. So neighbors can't call and say, I want this. They can call the law enforcement throughout the state and ask for the car to be towed, and then the law enforcement can initiate that, thus requiring that. This defines a law enforcement officer and what sorts of motor vehicles can be abandoned. Basically anything with an identification plate number or that is titleable for purposes of the abandoned motor vehicle subchapter. It clarifies that the landowner, defined as the property where the abandoned motor vehicle is located, which could be the towing business if the vehicle is relocated, can apply for an abandoned motor vehicle certification, and expands both the time to file the certification from 30 to 90 days, who can certify the VIN of the abandoned motor vehicle. It also increases the state reimbursement rate. So this is what the state pays to the towing company, since we don't have necessarily, I don't believe we have in fleet tow trucks. So we rely on these towing companies to collect abandoned vehicles on the sides of the roads. Right now in statute, we pay $40 to go out and tow and collect a car on the side, which when we heard from towing companies, that doesn't quite pay the bills. So that is increased up to $125. And it eliminates the existing $16,000 cap for total reimbursements each fiscal year. that I think my colleague from Appropriations will be speaking to after we go through all the sections of the bill. It also creates a towing storage lien that is held by the towing business for towing businesses, reasonable towing, storage, and remediation charges, and allows for the towing business to retain the vehicle and its contents until reasonable charges are paid or bond provided. Section 35, snowmobiles, proof of insurance. Amends codified law to require a snowmobile operator to carry proof of insurance, but allows that to be done electronically on a portable electronic device, and allows an operator cited for failing to carry proof of insurance to produce after the fact evidence within 7 days. So again, giving that 7 days leniency. Section 36 is a commercial driver's license drug and alcohol clearinghouse. It amends codified law to require the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles to check the Federal Commissioner's driver's license clearinghouse before issuing a commercial driver's license or commercial learner's permit, and establishes denial criteria based on this search. This has a different effective date of November 18th, 2024. That's when the federal requirement of this becomes effective. Section 37 has to do with the purchase and use tax. It amends codified law to allow the total cost to exclude the value of the vehicle as was previously registered, which is current law, or titled. So if you have a car that isn't necessarily registered but is titled and you have proof of that, that can be used in the purchase and use tax calculation. Because there are a limited number of motor vehicles that do not need to be registered, and title-only transactions trigger the payment and purchase of use tax. Talk about all those types of cars are kind of fun, but I'm sure we want to move on to the next parts of the bill. Purchase and use tax exemptions for purchase. Section 38 is further exceptions from purchase and use tax. It amends codified law to expand the exception for motor vehicles registered to an applicant in a jurisdiction that imposes a state sales and use tax on motor vehicles to apply if the motor vehicle has been registered to the applicant in such a jurisdiction for any amount of time, as opposed to the current in statute 3+ years. Gross weight limits on highway report. If I recall correctly, this was part of that DMV bill that was discussed and passed out of this chamber last session. It didn't make it over the finish line, but it's back again this year. This requires the Secretary of Transportation or designee in consultation with other individuals to examine adding one or more special annual permits to statute to allow for the operation of motor vehicles over 99,000 pounds, with a report due back to the House and Senate committees not later than January 15th, 2024. It includes minimum areas that need to be addressed, including a permit that allows 107,000 pounds on 6 axles or 117,000 pounds on 7 axles. Sections 40 through 43 are all part of this DMV core modernization system. I recall years ago, before I joined this legislature, the DMV has initiated modernization efforts before that didn't necessarily meet what some would characterize as success. This is a new effort, and I'm very optimistic because they have engaged with an organization that has successfully done this with other states. And so a lot of these next few recommendations are coming from that consulting agency that has experience modernizing Department of Motor Vehicle solutions with neighboring states. This sections 40 through 43, so this language comes from their recommendation through the DMV to this chamber. It allows, these sections allow the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles to make reasonable changes to existing Department of Motor Vehicle processes related to driver services as part of implementing the DMV core modernization project, provided that the Commissioner gets approval from the Joint Transportation Oversight Committee, JTOC, under a process that is established with deadlines and no disapproval, so silence, so from JTOC, within 30 calendar days of being deemed approval. This authority will expire on July 1st, 2025, requires modification to the statutory authority of JTOC, which is reverted to on July 1, 2025. Happy to expound upon that if you have questions or between now and third reading. Sections 44 through 46 is codifying what we've been doing in, I believe, a term I heard from Ledge Council, a clumsy way for the past 4 or 5 years. This is an ATV split. It just preserves and puts in place what we've been doing in the budget bill in different ways. That the 90-10 split between the Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation and the Transportation Fund of ATV fees and penalties will have 90% going to VASA, Vermont's ATV Sportsman Association. And then last section 47 are effective dates, and I believe I'll be speaking separately to the Finance Committee report and a small amendment.
Thank you, Senator from Chittenden Southeast. I'd now like to recognize the Senator from Chittenden Southeast for the Finance Committee report.
So your Senate Finance Committee did consider this bill. It has to have a fiscal note on it. Effectively, $17,000 of foregone transportation revenues because of the changes in overweight and milk hauling permits. But with simultaneously, we are anticipating a $15,000 annual savings from not issuing those really expensive durable stickers that we all love putting on our license plates that are no longer deemed necessary. So it's a bit of a wash. So those were the two major items in this bill, and your Senate Finance Committee voted at least 601, but it could have been 7-0. I don't have that in front of me. My apologies.
And I'm sure we can firm that up at a later moment. Thank you, Senator. We have a favorable report from the Appropriations Committee as well. Recognize Senator Perchlik.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Appropriations Committee reviewed just the one section that deals with appropriation, and that is that the state will be paying towing companies that have to tow a vehicle where the owner did show up, where a law enforcement officer had to call to have the vehicle removed for safety. If nobody comes and claims the car, the towing company needs to get paid for that work. The current statute is that they only get $40. This moves that to $125. As you heard from the report of the bill, we make some other changes to the towing section that might make it more common that they be able to get this fee. Right now, it's pretty difficult for them to get the fee, but it was under 20 times that the state paid towing companies in the last several years. So we're not expecting, any sizable amount of an appropriation. It will be in the hundreds or low thousands of dollars, if that. And so your Appropriations Committee voted to approve the bill 700.
Thank you, Senator. We have in the calendar an amendment to S99 to be offered by Senators Chittenden, Ingalls, Kitchell, Mazza, and Perchlik. Recognize the Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
After passing it out of committee, and while it was making its way through other committees, the Money, Finance, and Appropriations, your Senate Transportation Committee heard additional testimony regarding Section 21 and the reference to what a town highway was defined as. And it was suggested to us from DMV Captain Davidson that a more consistent definition of town highways for the purposes of this would be an alternative section where law enforcement is trained to use that terminology for town highways. Modest change, just repointing this bill to a different section of our statutes regarding how a town highway is defined.
Thank you. The question is, shall the amendment be approved? Shall the bill be amended as recommended by Senators Chittenden et al.? Are you ready for that question?
Point of order.
Senator from Madison.
I'm just, or point of clarification, I guess. Is this the amendment, the little amendment that we just heard?
Yes.
Not the full bill?
This is the amendment that appears at the very bottom of page 312.
Okay.
And then continues to the top, not the amendment below that to be offered by Senator White.
And not the full bill. I have questions for the senator who,
Yeah,
but I
it is not the full report.
Great, thank you, Mr. President.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as proposed by Senator Chittenden and others? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. And the ayes have it. You have amended the report of the Committee on Transportation. We have on the calendar a second amendment. Senator from Windsor, will you be offering that amendment?
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I will not be offering my amendment on S99. After discussion with your esteemed Senate Transportation Committee, I believe that we will be working together to introduce something on third reading. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The question then at this point is, shall the bill as amended be read the third time? Are you ready for that question? Senator from Addison?
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire of the reporter of the bill?
The senator from Chittenden Southeast will be interrogated.
Thank you. I am looking on the version that was passed out to each of us on page 47, section 39. This is the section about the increasing the weight limits. It's just a report, I do realize that, but I'm wondering, just curious, are these basically logging trucks, or what type of vehicle might this be that's so heavy?
So my recollections of these discussions is they certainly could be logging trucks. This is just a study, not changing any rules.
Yep.
To understand what the implications could be to amend some of the weight limits on our roads. If I recall correctly, Mr. President, there were concerns from the DMV about just changing these weight limits, which could implicate or could affect some of our federal fundings for our highways. So they want to dive deeper into this topic to better understand what this might entail for the entire state.
Okay, so it involves the Commissioner of Forest Parks and Rec, so that's why I wondered if it might be logging trucks or what types of vehicles, but that's probably what they are if they're so heavy and it involves them. And the next section, section 40, the implementation, can you just explain a little bit more what type of authority this is giving the commissioner, and then who serves on the Joint Transportation Oversight Committee?
So I don't know offhand who serves on the Joint Technology Oversight Committee. I can get that for you for third reading, or we can take a short recess about it, but maybe I can speak to the intent of this. One of the reasons why the last Department of Motor Vehicles efforts did not be successful is it sometimes is difficult to implement a solution in technology implementation realms that run against state statute and force of law. And I've heard this body is very deliberate, and we only meet for 3 to 4 months a year, and so sometimes it can really derail. Time can be very costly to the success of a project. The intent of this section is to allow for the commissioner during the implementation that if a small change needs to be made to, for example, this wasn't offered so maybe I should be careful, but eye color. So if, for example, currently in statute somewhere it defines the 6 types of eye color that could be on a driver's license, but for some reason the system software that we need to put in must have an other option, rather than have to go to the legislature to approve a 7th category of eye color for our driver's licenses. This would allow the Department of Motor Vehicle Commissioners to go to this body of legislators, the Joint Technology Oversight Committee, that meets in the off session upon demand to ask for conditional approval on those things so they can move forward with the project.
So on page 49, paragraph B1, it basically, it's saying that the commissioner can provide a detailed explanation for how statutes or rules will need to be amended in order to have statutes and rules be consistent with DMV processes going forward. Does it actually give them the authority to move forward prior to us amending statute or rule?
It does. So this would allow, with J Talk's approval, but those statutes could then by the legislature not be approved, and they would have to roll back and undo those changes. That's my understanding. I can follow up between now and third reading.
I guess I find that pretty problematic that that this individual committee on an off session would give a commissioner permission to go ahead with something prior to the full legislature or the rules committee seeing those changes. I think this sets a really problematic precedent.
So this did come up in our, Mr. President, this did come up in our committee discussions. I think where we landed and why we are supportive of this is because it is confined to Department of Motor Vehicle processes with relation to implementation of an IT solution. And since the previous efforts at this were not successful, partly because of the delays related to it, it seemed that to get off of our 40 to 50-year-old mainframe device to allow for the modern services needed to be able to renew your driver's license online, to not have to mail things in, to pay with an ACH versus a credit card on the web platform, and to reduce the cost and time of it, it would involve giving up some of our immediate authority over statutes for a period of time. Your concern is valid. We did consider that with the committee as we weighed the importance of getting to the this millennium, our DMV platform. We saw it as a necessary risk to run to allow for the Department of Motor Vehicles Commissioner to use her good judgment in consultation with a body of representatives that are charged to meet in the off time, queuing up the changes to then be proposed to this full legislature for formal adoption or rebuttal.
I appreciate the desire and necessity of moving forward with changes to our IT systems. We have heard many times about multiple IT systems in many departments that are problematic and need to be updated. I'm sure that this is true for DMV, but I think this sets a really troubling precedent that we're going to allow an individual committee on an off session approve the authority of a commissioner to move ahead against statute and rule with changes. And I find that really problematic and makes it difficult for me to support this bill. But I have a third question, and that is on page 52, the section 46. This is changing the sort of proportion of fees that go to different entities. And so 90% of the fees would go to the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation. The other 10%, where does that go?
The Transportation Fund, Mr. President?
The Transportation Fund. So 90% goes to Department of Forest, Parks and Rec, and 10% goes to the Transportation Fund. You mentioned in your report something about some of it going to VASA.
So if you read on line 17 of page 52, it states that the amount of 90% of the fees and penalties collected under the chapter, except interest, is allocated to the Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation for use by the Vermont ATV Sportsmen's Association for development and maintenance of the statewide ATV trail program. So I believe they are the holder, the receiver of the funds to then allocate and commission that body to do the work.
Okay, so this is not a change? Is this just an update to the language saying instead of A&R, it's the individual department? Is that the only change?
As I see it, it is codifying what we've been doing since 2018 to reallocate to the Department of Forest and Parks and Recreation from the Agency of Natural Resources.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator from Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire of the reporter of Section 39?
Senator from Chittenden Southeast will be interrogated.
Thank you. At a legislative breakfast yesterday, we were discussing with the Lumber Association the patchwork of overweight permits around the state that are issued by municipalities. And as we deal with overweight trucks, which, you know, I understand the many issues actually that are involved with this, I'm just curious, what are we doing to explore having a statewide permit rather than municipal permits that are just this patchwork of individual permits that are challenging for some of the companies that operate the overweight trucks?
Mr. President, part of this DMV modernization effort is to allow for a centralized portal to pay for the fees and the permits that are needed by truck drivers that are routing goods and services throughout the state of Vermont. That is, those DMV modernization sections are in separate sections of this bill, but this certainly as part of the study would include the conversation and topics about if the permits were to be revised, how they could be folded into statewide issuance of permits. I don't know if that answers the Senator's question.
And do we think this language explicitly asks for that?
I will go back to section 39, and I don't know if I have the answer to you off the top of my mind. We approved this out of committee prior to our town meeting week break, and some of those things are a little fuzzy. So if the Senator would give me a moment, I'll look at section 39. Reviewing, at the minimum, the examination shall address allowing a tractor, truck, trailer combination to the legal dimensions to be separated into legal weights without it. So you're thinking about statewide permits, reviewing the sections for the Okay, limits, part of the committee's charge will be limitations for any additional special annual gross weight vehicle permits based on highway type, including limited access state highway, non-limited access state highway, class 1 town highways, and class 2 town highways. I would interpret that, and as additional bullet points that I could continue to read through do speak about permit fees and additional gross weight. So I'd interpret that as looking at statewide permits.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Senator from Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire of the presenter of sections 4 through 13?
Yes, Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you. I just need a little more clarity on section 4, Mr. President, on your registration periods. Is it my understanding that this bill now will allow someone to simply receive a registration certificate and a license plate with a small registration sticker now not being displayed on number plates?
I think I missed the middle part of your question. You saying that, yes, this would Mr. President, this would no longer require those stickers to be on our license plates.
Thank you. Having said that, I'm all about saving money for Vermonters, obviously. But I guess my question delves into the stickers on the plates now. Law enforcement will be able to now, they're just on the rear of the vehicle, observe the registration sticker and whether it's valid or invalid. And upon doing that, they can call in through DMV on their license, on their radios, and check the validation of that plate. Now, having said that, with no registration stickers on their plates being visible at this point in time, did you take any testimony now as if the law enforcement simply use their radios, call into DMV, run that plate, and if it comes back invalid, can they actually now stop that vehicle? Is it considered a primary or secondary offense?
Mr. President, we did take testimony, and I realized in the reporting of the bill and the amendments and the Finance Committee report, I did not list our witnesses, but I will state that we did hear from Lieutenant Paul Ravlin, Special Operations Executive Officer for Vermont State Police, related to some of these topics, as well as Tony Fakos, Director of Enforcement and Safety, Vermont Department of Motor Vehicles. I don't know if it's a primary or secondary offense. I do recall in test, I can get that to you for third reading, or we can take a recess and I can speak to Ledge Council. But I do recall from the testimony taken from the witnesses that the sticker itself is not necessary because of the. Probably hears about this. The reliability of internet service and cell service from throughout most of the highways of the great state of Vermont, for them to be able to enter in the license plate to determine the registration status of the vehicle when they pull a car over. I don't know on the primary or secondary. I recall from testimony from Mr. Fakos that they don't rely upon the sticker to determine if the license plates are valid or not, but instead use the license plate number.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess I would ask, the only question prior to the third reading would be to get clarification as to if it will be considered a primary or secondary offense.
I will do that, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, shall S99 as amended be read the third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay.
No.
And you have ordered third reading of S99. We have on the calendar now S35 for second reading, introduced by the Senator from Windsor, Senator White, and others. Please listen to the second reading of that bill.
S35, an act relating to the Town of Hartford's Tax Increment Financing District.
Recognize the Senator from Windsor, Senator McCormick, for a report on the Committee of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill does two things. It both involving extending the TIF program for the town of Hartford. The two things it does is it extends the period of time in which the town may incur debt for 2 years, and it extends for 2 years the deadline, which is 10 years out, of how long the town may collect tax revenues on the TIF increments. I will now explain what TIFs are. TIFs are tax incremental financing. And when a municipality improves infrastructure, it improves the property values of properties adjacent to those infrastructure, such as sewer and water, lights, curbs, etc. Because the property values increase, the tax revenues, the property tax revenues on those properties also increase. And though that the portion of the property tax collected on these properties that is there because of the improvement is an increment. And a TIF allows a municipality to borrow money in anticipation of the improved grand list that will result, and then to pay the debt with those increases. Hartford is asking for more time because they were not able to complete their projects in the promised time. And the reason for that is COVID. The fact is the town of Hartford has operated in good faith and has actually performed impressively, has greatly increased the grand list value of affected properties. However, COVID has affected, as everyone knows, COVID has affected availability of materials, availability of labor, and it has proven impossible for the town to do everything it intended to do when it intended to do it. And so that is the short version. If there are further questions, I'll be happy to answer them. I'd say that the vote in committee was 6-1-0, and we heard from David Briggs, who is a local businessman and community leader, Lori Hirschfeld, Director of Planning and Development at the town of Hartford. We heard from Senator Rebecca White, who is the chief sponsor of the bill. I serve on the committee, but also acted as an advocate for the bill. We heard from Tanya Morehouse, chief auditor at the state auditor's office. Gail Ostrout, town manager of the town of Hartford. Abby Sherman, executive director of the Vermont Economic Progress Council, and Rebecca Wasserman from the Office of Legislative Counsel. In the interest of full disclosure, I should mention that the state auditor's office pointed out that increment money that is used for the payment of improvements is money that does not go into the school fund. The committee considered this objection carefully, open-minded. We came to the conclusion, or we observed the fact, that the money in question is money that wouldn't be there at all if not for the improvement. So nothing is taken from the school fund. Rather, there is a matter of new grand list value, which is used one way, used to pay for the improvements that caused the grand list value increase to exist in the first place. And there is a deadline on how long the town may use the monies that way. So, Mr. President, it is the urging of the Finance Committee. Did I just mention the vote or not?
Yes.
I did mention. Okay, we urge the Senate to advance the bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator from Windsor. The question is, shall S35 be read the third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have ordered third reading of S35. We have on the calendar for action S36, introduced on January 25th, 2023. It was referred to the Committee on Judiciary, which reports it has considered the same and recommends the bill be amended as shown in today's calendar at page 314. The bill was then referred to the Committee on Health and Welfare, which reports it has considered the same and recommends the bill be amended as shown in today's calendar at page 316. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
S36, an act relating to permitting an arrest without a warrant for assaults and threats against healthcare workers and disorderly conduct at healthcare facilities.
I'd like to recognize the senator from Bennington, Senator Sears, for the report of the Committee on Judiciary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think it was 3 years ago, right about this time of year, when COVID hit. And we were referring to people who worked in our hospitals as heroes. We treated them as such. We spent a lot of time doing whatever we could to help them get nurses, doctors, etc. Somehow, these heroes have become the target of abuse. And, Mr. President, that's unacceptable. H36 is not a magic wand. It will make some difference, maybe not at all, as much as we would hope. But it does offer some hope for the future. Workplace violence in hospitals has increased in recent years. Nationally, 2 nurses are assaulted every hour, according to a recent Press-Ganey analysis. Vermont's largest hospital is reporting on average more than 1 incident of workplace violence a day in its emergency department. Not only does that impact the workers, but others who are seeking health care in those emergency departments. It impacts them adversely. It's something that we can't tolerate any longer. S36 attempts to deal with that. And I wanted to kind of explain what S36 does. There is an amendment from the Health and Welfare Committee. It will be coming up shortly, but I wanted to explain Rule 3, which is what is amended here. Rule 3 is something, and former trooper, the senator from Windham County, who's a member of the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee, said it's something that all law enforcement officers aim to memorize. It's a guide to when you can arrest and when you can't arrest. You can cite for misdemeanors that aren't observed by the law enforcement officers, but you can't arrest somebody. Citing means that you tell them to be in court X date, but they can't be immediately arrested. We have exceptions to Rule 3, to that non-witness misdemeanor offense. And among them, the main one is someone who has assaulted a family member, domestic violence. We also have other misdemeanor offenses where a law enforcement officer can arrest if they have probable cause. Currently, and you will note on page 315 of today's calendar that Rule 3C is amended to add the person has committed a misdemeanor that involves an assault against a healthcare worker in a healthcare facility, as those terms are defined in 13 VSA 1028D. The person has violated 13 VSA 1702 is criminal threatening against a healthcare worker in a healthcare facility. And 3, committed disorderly conduct, VSA 13 VSA 1026. Your committees on health and welfare and judiciary held a joint meeting. We heard some compelling testimony from healthcare workers. Not only were healthcare workers being assaulted in emergency rooms and treated with vulgar and offensive behaviors, they were also being stalked, threatened. Persons of color were being outlandishly called names, etc., that I wouldn't compete on the Senate floor. All in an effort to do their jobs. Many times, these were not being done by the patient, but rather somebody else who was with that patient in the emergency room or in another healthcare setting. One gentleman, a nurse, told us of his experiences, and you could tell, I don't know how he continues to function as a nurse, given the testimony that he provided us. And a tree fell out there. We were in the Pavilion office building holding our joint hearing. And when the tree fell, this gentleman jumped up, and you could tell, how nervous he was because of the noise outside. Again, this is from trauma experienced as a healthcare professional, being assaulted on the job. The major difference, as I see it, between the Senate Judiciary Committee version of the bill and the Senate has to do with disorderly conduct. And this is under disorderly conduct, the statute engages in fighting or in violent, tumultuous, or threatening behavior. And that is covered in both versions of the bill. What isn't covered in the health and welfare version, as I read it, is makes unreasonable noise in a public place, uses abusive or obscene language without lawful authority, disturbs any lawful assembly or meeting of persons, or obstructs vehicular or pedestrian traffic. And then the Senate Health and Welfare Committee has added criminal threatening in Section 2, which I'll let them explain. But cut to the chase, Mr. President, the Committee on Judiciary voted 4-1 on passage. Thus far, I've heard no objection to the version offered by the Senate Health and Welfare Committee. I personally will be supporting that version. I thank them for their efforts and their work. It was a joint effort, and certainly hope that this bill passes and that the other body will take it up, and that we can at least offer some hope to these heroes. They're still heroes to me with what they did during the pandemic. So thank you, Mr. President. I'm happy to answer any other questions about the bill or about some of the witnesses we've heard from.
Thank you, Senator from Bennington. For the report of the Committee on Health and Welfare, Chair recognizes Senator from Rutland, Senator Weeks.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, the esteemed Senator from Bennington, for clearly outlining the judicial aspects of S36. I'll keep the Health and Welfare Committee's comments very concise and focus on healthcare workers' perspective. As the Senator from Bennington articulated, COVID has hit the medical community extremely hard, and they're still coming back into balance. As you also know, retention and recruiting for the medical fields continues to be challenging. But something else is happening in the hospitals through the past 3 years and is draining the soul of healthcare workers. This is the tripling of violence against medical staff, primarily in the emergency rooms, from visitors, family members, and patients. Our largest hospital reported last year over 500 incidents in that 1 year alone. Unfortunately, in these incidents, our medical staffs are routinely confronted by law enforcement's confusion on whether to intervene. The bill intends to eliminate that confusion. As the Senator from Bennington outlined, and you may have already heard the story about the joint Judiciary and Health and Welfare testimony about the nurse testifying about the patient's punch that left him unconscious and with a concussion. During this testimony, as the Senator from Bennington articulated, there was an electrical incident outside the pavilion that sounded like a gunshot. We saw the nurse lose it. The gentleman, one of our valuable healthcare workers, suffered multiple incidents of violence in the workplace and is now suffering from PTSD. And he's suffering bad. And I know PTSD. I could see it. We took dozens of gut-wrenching testimonies from Vermont doctors and nurses who increasingly are being punched, kicked, spit on, and bitten. No medical staff should suffer such indignities. To address a few of your likely thoughts, yes, in testimony, we found that the hospitals have a heavy focus on de-escalation training and procedures. And yes, we do recognize the report emphasized the fragile nature of the state's mental health system. The response to the mental health crisis continues underway in various other Senate and House bills. And yes, our testifiers and the committee recognize that the bill will not completely stop the violence. It is another tool to protect our health, to protect a critical element of our community. The Senate Health and Welfare Committee took testimony from doctors, nurses, CEOs, and ER directors from 10 medical centers representing 8 counties. Also, from the Southwest Vermont Healthcare Network, the Washington County Mental Health Services, Vermont Legal Aid, Vermont Federation of Nurses and Health Professionals, Vermont Association of Hospitals and Health Systems, and the Vermont Medical Society, and Vermont's Office of Racial Equity. The committee vote was 5-0-0. Please support Vermont's healthcare workers and vote yes. And thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator from Rutland. The question now is, shall the report of the Committee on Judiciary be amended as recommended by the Committee on Health and Welfare? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have amended the report of the Committee on Judiciary as recommended by the Committee on Health and Welfare. The question now is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Judiciary as amended? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. No. The ayes have it, and you have amended the bill as recommended by the Committee on Judiciary as amended. The final question is, shall the bill be read the third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Nay. You have ordered third reading of the bill. We have, yes, we will, due to a request from the presenter, pass over S60 and move to JRH3, Joint Resolution. JRH3 relating to Green Mountain Boys State was introduced on March 14th. And please listen to the reading of the resolution by title only.
JRH3, Joint Resolution authorizing the Green Mountain Boys State Educational Program to use the State House facilities on June 29, 2023.
Now you've heard the reading of the resolution. The chair, in its discretion, will place the my mistake. We have already read it. The question now is, shall the Senate adopt the joint House resolution in concurrence? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. And the ayes have it. You have passed JRH 3. That concludes the orders of the day. I would look to the senator from Grand Isle for a motion.
President, subject to the announcement, I move the Senate adjourn until tomorrow morning at 11 a.m.
Senator from Grand Isle has moved, pending announcements, that the Senate stand in adjournment until 11 a.m. tomorrow morning. Are there any announcements at this time? Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Health and Welfare will meet in 10 minutes.
Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Economic Development will meet in 10 minutes.
Senator from Bennington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Education will meet this afternoon at 1:30.
Senator from Addison. Both senators from Addison. Actually, it was the junior senator from Addison has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. What was I going to say? Government Operations is going to meet at 1:30. Thank you.
The remaining senator from Addison.
Mr. President, Senate Natural Resources and Energy, will be 5 minutes after the call of the gavel. We have a lawyer with whom we have limited time waiting.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Finance will meet at 1 o'clock. This is our big week.
Senator from Essex.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate institutions will meet at 1 o'clock today.
Senator from Orleans.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Senate Ag will meet right after the fall of the gavel.
Senator from Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Democratic Caucus will meet in the lounge at 12:15 sharp. We have lots of things to discuss, and we will be done in time for the afternoon committees, which have a lot of work to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Just a reminder that floor times have changed for this week. The motion has already been made for 11 a.m. tomorrow. Our floor time on Thursday will also be 11 a.m., and then on Friday as normal at 11:30 a.m. With that said, the senator from Grand Isle has moved that the Senate stand in adjournment until 11 a.m., Wednesday, March 22nd, 2023. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All of those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we have adjourned until 11 a.m. Wednesday, March 22nd.